fire. Edward's repairs were progressing nicely. His new boiler had been placed onto him quicker than anyone had expected, and he had passed nearly all the tests. Now, he just needed to have his controls placed back, and his brake pipe fixed, and he would be ready to go. It was early in the morning, and the residents of the museum were being prepared for visitors, after the Vicarstown Rail Museum manager's meeting about Denise's near miss with the flying kipper. The only exception to this was Eagle, who was being prepared for his rail tour. "Thank goodness for Henry's ingenuity," sighed Edward. "Ned would have liked him."
"And who, dare I ask, is Ned?"
a particularly haughty-looking brake van grunted. The other engines looked crossly at her.
"Hey, advise ye, madam,"
scolded an elderly Claude Hamilton,
"to treat your elders with some respect."
"Oh, petrol fumes to you!"
the brake van retorted.
"I only asked."
Edward chuckled. "Well, I suppose I should explain," he said, and then told them everything he had said to Diesel. "Oh, my darling," gushed a narrow-gauge engine. "What a gallant, dear old friend he is."
"He'll be a grand member of our crew when he comes,"
one agreed.
"When's he coming?"
asked Jim. Edward sighed. He had been dreading questions like this. "I'm afraid he can't." And this was the story he told. It had been a long, hot summer. The fields were dry, and there had been no sign of rain for months. But the engines pressed onwards. They dutifully pulled their trains along the line. They did try their best to avoid sparks from their funnel, but I'm sorry to say that the heat made any spark from anyone, person or engine, into a roaring inferno. Edward and Ned were in the yard busily shunting trucks. They had both just finished taking on water at the column and were talking together. "'Tis a right scorcher and near mistake," stated Ned. "Thou's best to keep yon sparks in yon funnel, my son." "Why's that?" asked Edward.
"You see, kid,"
explained Ned,
"when them sparks gets out of thy funnel, they's gotta go someplace. So they goes through there and lands on the ground. If the ground is dry and covered with grass, thou started a fire. That's serious, that is. Thou starts a fire, thou's putting folk in terrible danger. Luckily, us engines have water, so we's got nae worries about our fires, but we maun watch out for the sparks."
"Engines causing fires," said Edward. He looked sad.
"Nay, don't worry about it, son,"
laughed Ned.
"Thou's a better engine than that. I doubt thou'll cause fires."
Edward smiled at this. He loved working with Ned. They had been together for some time. Every day they talked, and every day Edward became a better engine through Ned's tutelage. Ned too seemed to brighten up when Edward was near. They had practically become family to each other by now. But Ned was getting old. His bearings were worn. His boiler certificate was nearing its expiry date. He never admitted this to Edward, but he had been told earlier that day that he might be sent for scrap. He couldn't bear telling Edward, so decided to wait for the right moment.
"Besides," he thought, "if thy controllers think they can scrap me, I's going down fighting."
Just then, the station master ran up. "You have to go up the line, quickly! Sparks from the 10:30 passenger service have set the grass ablaze. There's a fire on the line side," he told them. Immediately, the two engines and their crews jumped into action. they could see a plume of dark smoke arising slowly in the distance. They charged towards it, Edward in front, Ned behind. The signals show clear, and trains in their section were halted and diverted onto sidings and loops as the two engines thundered past. "We must stop it! We must stop it! We must stop it!" panted Edward.
We will stop it, we will stop it, we will stop it, puffed Ned.
"We must stop it!
We will stop it,
We must stop it!
we will stop it,
We must stop it!
we will stop it,
We must stop it!"
we will stop it.
They chanted together. Very soon, they could see the flames flickering in the distance. Edward heard the bells of a fire engine ringing. But the flames had edged closer and closer to the sleepers, and were now completely blocking the line. "That fire service is near gonna be here in time," Ned cried. Edward looked at the flames. They were growing larger by the second, yet still. "Tell your crew to fill your fire bucket with water from the tanks. We'll use them to fight the fire." Ned did so. His tanks were still full to the brim, so his fireman climbed up onto his left side and filled up his bucket. Then Ned's fireman threw it onto the water, while Edward's crew threw sand and water from his own bucket all over it. The fire brigade soon arrived on the scene. By now, the fire was a smouldering shadow of what it once was, so they used their coats and successfully beat it out. Thankfully, the fire had been dealt with quickly, so the damage to the line was easily repaired by the end of the day. Edward and Ned returned home to a hero's welcome, amidst a chorus of cheers and whistles from the other engines. "Well done, you two," beamed the station master. "The fire brigade told us everything. That was some very quick work on your part." "More so to thou, Edward," smiled Ned. He had a tired look in his eyes. Edward was surprised. "What?" he exclaimed. "I didn't do—"
"Oh yea, thou did," Ned cut him off. "'Twas thou's idea to use her water. If anyone's the hero here, it's thou."
Edward's happiness was beyond words. That night in the sheds, neither he nor Ned could stop thinking about the day's events. Edward looked across to the old engine. He was tired beyond all belief. "Ned," he whispered, "are you all right?"
"Aye, why'd you ask?"
"You look like you're about to fall apart. You're so worn out." Ned opened his eyes wide, then relaxed. There was a long silence.
"I'm near gonna be here forever," he said at last.
Edward stared at him. "Why?"
"'Cause of yon controllers. All of me brothers been scrapped."
And as gently as he could, he explained what that was.
"So you see, I reckon it's only a matter of time before I gets broken up."
You mean you're gone? Forever?"
"Nay. Some fews yes may want to get summat off of me afore I'se nothing left of me. 'Tis the way of yon world, Edward. We're born, till we die. I've seen many a crew go through that. Sometimes all that's left of us is memories. We still live on, just near physical life. But thou, Edward, thou'll always live on. Things like putting out fires, they guess thou noticed they does. And today, I had never felt more proud of thou, my little Ben. If thou and I were folk set of engines, I would be proud to call thee my son."
"And I would be honored to have you as a father." Edward smiled. But their happiness wasn't to last. The next day, they received some bad news. Edward was to be sold to a railway on another island, while Ned was to go to the scrapyard to be broken up, both at the end of the month. "I'm sorry it has to be like this," the station master said with small tears in his eyes. He had become quite fond of his two engines. Both of them looked at each other and vowed then and there to make the last few weeks they had together the best they ever had with each other. Dark times had loomed over the railway. It was 1915. Britain was at war with Germany. Every day, soldiers crowded the platform and made their way over to the docks, where military vessels would be waiting to carry them away. Only a few of these men ever came back alive. Those who did were merely shells of what they had once been. The goods sidings were packed with special trucks. Some of these were loaded with food, clothing, and empty guns, and were preferred considerably to other loads for the army. These were vans full of gunpowder and bullets. Every engine knew to handle them with great care. One wrong move could mean disaster. It had been a few weeks since Ned and Edward were told they would be separated. They had spent the time talking and laughing. Edward had learned much from Ned. He was now a kind and wise engine. He had long since realized the values of patience, respect, and helping others, to the point where their crews weren't sure anymore which of them was older, so they said. Nevertheless, the two engines worked happily together, shunting in the yards and double-heading their trains. They had never enjoyed each other's company more. Ned was in the yard, being seamed up for his final run and waiting for Edward to arrive and be loaded onto the ship. The station master had told the controllers about him and Edward, and they all agreed it was the least they could do to let them have one last moment together to say a proper farewell to each other. Suddenly, Ned had an idea.
"Hey, fireman!" he called. "You got pencil and paper?"
"Yes," said his fireman. "Why?"
"Can I write something down and get to Edward when he gets here? I've got something I want to say to him for the future."
"Of course," agreed the fireman, and he listened carefully to Ned's dictation, writing down everything on the paper. It was only a few minutes after they had finished and before Edward was due to arrive when the worst possible thing happened. No one quite knew how it started. Perhaps the sun had caused the van to heat up. Perhaps someone had been smoking and left a cigarette by the van. Or perhaps sparks had flown out from a passing engine. One thing was certain. There was a van full of explosives on fire at the front of a gunpowder train of 40 vans right by the line Edward was due to arrive on. Immediately, alarms sounded and soldiers, dock workers and civilians alike ran for cover. Only Ned, his crew and the station master were left behind.
What great stupid wasp did that?
Bellowed Ned in fury. "If that thing goes," began the fireman. "Don't think about it," snapped the driver. He and Ned both shared a knowing look. "Just set those points for us to those trucks. Station master, I guess you know what to do." "Indeed I do," said the station master. "Wait!" called the fireman. He pressed the letter into the station master's hands. "If we don't make it back, give this to Edward, please." "Of course," agreed the station master gravely. He ran to the station and sent an urgent message to the signalman. As soon as the points were set and the burning truck uncoupled from the rest of the train, Ned ran around to the front and backed down onto it. He was coupled up to the truck and began to pull with all his might.
"Well, perhaps thy controllers will finally notice I was near going without a fight,"
Ned said to his driver.
"Hear, hear, old boy,"
he agreed. Slowly but surely, Ned forced the truck into motion. The load was heavy, so progress was slow. Ned quickly became out of breath and very tired from the effort, but doggedly persisted, determined to prevent the imminent catastrophe. Suddenly, he heard a familiar whistle. "Nay," he cried. "Nay. Nay, Edward. Nay, my bairn. You're nae taking my son!" With much puffing and wheel slipping, Ned pulled the train, his vigour and determination renewed. He soon picked up speed and raced past Edward. Edward saw the burning van race past him, and for a fleeting moment saw Ned, a sad expression on his face, and was certain he heard the words,
"Goodbye, son."
His crew had seen everything and slammed on his brakes. As soon as he stopped, Edward shunted back as fast as he could. But it wasn't fast enough. The explosion rocked the surrounding area. After that, the air was filled with a deathly silence. Edward raced onwards. He hoped desperately that what he feared most at that moment had not happened, that Ned would be fine, that he would come out of it all with a large grin on his smokebox. But the wreckage told him otherwise. Edward was beyond all words. The line was destroyed, a large crater in the place of where the rails once stood. Several buildings nearby were almost completely demolished. The gunpowder van was all to pieces. Rescue crews immediately arrived on the scene to tend to the wounded in the nearby buildings, but one person was too seriously hurt and died of his wounds. Ned's driver limped towards them, badly hurt, and Edward's crew helped him into the cab, making sure he was comfortable. But the charred skeleton of Ned's fireman was plain for all to see. But worst of all was the mangled body of Ned, beyond repair and dead. Edward could not stand it. Nothing his driver nor fireman could do would make him move. It was only when one of his brothers towed him away that he managed to reach the dockside at all. Even then, Edward said nothing but burst into floods of tears. It was some time before he stopped crying, and even then it was only because he had no more tears left. Then he saw a figure stumbling towards him. It was the station master. "Ned wanted you to have this," he said, placing it on his buffer beam. Then he looked up at Edward. "I just want you to know, you two were the best engines I ever had at this station." "Thank you, sir," said Edward. Later, he was loaded on board the ship. As he was lowered, he took one last look at Barrow in Furness and realized something. Had Ned not done as he did, the whole town might have been destroyed. With this thought, he was lowered into the cargo hold and taken away across the sea to the island of Sodor. When he arrived there, he was met with a stout, smartly dressed man wearing a black top hat. This was the Fat Director. "My name is Sir Richard Topham Hatt, Director of the North Western Railway," he said. "What's your name?" "Edward, sir," replied Edward sadly. The Fat Director looked kindly at him. "I understand you have recently had a traumatic experience," he continued. "I too have lost loved ones in this war. But while I cannot bring anyone back, I think you may still be able to honor his legacy in some small way, should you wish to do so." "And that was how it happened," finished Edward. "Soon after I arrived, Thomas came. He needed a lot of help learning how to shunt and pull trains. Soon, we had managed to build a whole railway between us. After the Sodor Mainland Railway, the Tidmouth, Knapford and Elsbridge Railway and the Wellsworth and Sudbury Railway formed to become the North Western Railway. We built the bridge between Vicarstown and Barrow, which soon made the railway what it is today. The fat director was right. I did find a way to honor Ned. He was the reason I became who I am today. It is thanks to him that I learned everything I did, and I have always made a point to pass on everything he taught me to other engines. But sometimes I wonder, am I truly able to live up to his name? I don't even know if he is still proud of me even now.
The museum engines were silent. They were touched by Edward's story. At last, Jim spoke up. "I think he would be," he said cautiously. "You've come so far, Edward, and have done so much."
"Aye," agreed Neil. "Just one thing, Edward. What did yon letter say?" "It read," Edward began, but was interrupted by an excited horn blast. Diesel raced into the yard, an excited look on his face.
"Come on, Edward," he said. "We'll have you fixed and ready to pull the rail tour by tomorrow."